All right, this lesson is going to cover lessons 16 and 17 in your textbook. We're going to be talking about solving for x, and the best thing to do is just to jump in and start working these, all right? Two x plus 4. So the first thing I need to remember is two things side by side without a sign means multiply. At this level, we're not going to use an x for multiplication. And in problems like this, when I'm dealing with a single term, I rarely am going to see it written like this. Now, when I'm simplifying things, I might see parentheses, but Algebra 1 level, Algebra 2 level, and beyond, they just write them side by side. And we know two things side by side with no sign means multiply. And my goal is to solve for this. Now, some of us can look at this and say, well, 2 times 7 is 14. But let me show you how we're going to mathematically work this problem step by step and get there. And while it's not important necessarily right now, if we can start with these simple ones, understanding the process, when they get bigger, it'll make a little bit more sense. If our goal is to get x by itself, I've got to get rid of this. And I've got to get rid of it by moving it over here. And when I move it, the operation changes. Well, what's the mathematical operation? It's multiplication in this one. So when I pick the 2 up and I move it over the equal sign, the operation changes from multiplication to division. I'm not touching the x. I'm not touching the equals. I'm not touching the 14, but I am moving the 2 from the left side to the right side. When I do that, the operation changes. It goes from multiplication to division, and then 14 divided by 2 is 7. Again, I know you can look at that and do it, but that's how it's worked out mathematically. Now, let's look at this problem. My goal is still to get x by itself. My goal is still to have x equals. So I have to move everything away from the x. I have a 2 and I have a 4. And the rule is save the x for last. Whatever is touching the x, move that last. Move everything else first. Okay? So I'm going to need to pick up my plus 4, and I'm going to need to move it over the equal sign over here. When I do that, the operation changes from plus 4 to minus 4. I'm not touching the 2x. I'm not touching the equals. I'm not touching the 14. I'm picking my plus 4 up. I'm moving it over the equal sign, so the operation changes from addition to subtraction. Well, what is 14 minus 4? 14 minus 4 is 10. Now I need to move my 2. What operation is happening? Two things side by side with no sign is multiply. So when I move that over, it becomes divided by 2 because the operation changes, and therefore x equals 5. Now, if I wanted to take the time to check this, what if I can fit this up here small? I could plug this 5 back in here and do 2 times 5 plus 4, which is 10 plus 4, which is 14, which is what I wanted. I'm not going to require you to check it. I mean, if you're taking a test and want to see if it's right, you can always check it that way. All right, let's take this another step. Let's take this another step and look at this problem. Now, don't start freaking out because there's more than one x. What we need to do is we need to get our x's together. And for whatever reason, our brains process x equals something better than something equals x. We just like to have x on the left side. So what we're going to do is we're going to get all of our x's on one side of the equal sign. Typically, we want them on the left side because our brains just think better that way. So I'm going to move my minus 3x. That minus has to stay with it, okay? I'm going to move it over my equal sign. When I do that, the sign or the operation changes. I'm not touching my 2x. I'm not touching my 4. Now my minus 3x is going to move from one side to the other and become plus 3x because the operation changes. Now I need to move my plus 4, my non-variable term, my term with no x's, over to the other guy who has no x's, okay? I'm not touching my 2x. I'm not touching my 3x. I'm not touching my equals 14, but I'm going to move plus 4 over the equal sign. When I do that, the operation changes, so it becomes minus 4. Now I'm going to simplify. 2x plus 3x is 7x. I have 2 x's. What in the world, 7x? 5x. I have 2 x's. I get 3 more x's. Now I have 5x. 14 minus 4 is 10. All right, I'm not done yet because x is not by itself. Remember, that's my whole goal. And kids say that to me a lot. How do I know when I'm done? You're done when x is by itself. So now I need to get this 5 over here away from my x. And remember, the operation changes. So what operation is happening here? Well, two things side by side with no sign means multiply. So I'm going to move that 5 over, and the operation is going to change from multiplication to division, and 10 divided by 5 is 2, so x equals 2. kind of the same idea in that I have two x's. So I'm going to go ahead and combine those. If I have 9x's and I get 2 more x's, I now have 11x. Now that's a negative 29, okay? You have to also remember your negative and positive rules. I need to get x by itself, so I'm going to move this plus 7 over. When I move a plus 7 over, it becomes a minus. All right, now listen, you're going to have to remember your negative and positive rules. These are both negative, so what I'm technically going to do is I'm going to add. Ooh, I don't know what that is. I'm going to add, and when I add 29 plus 7, I get 36, and they're both negative. So the answer is negative. All right, I'm not done yet. I got to move this 11 over. When I move it over, it's going to become division. Now, this is important. At this level of mathematics, this can't be reduced. That is your answer. Do not convert it to a decimal. Your answers need to stay in fraction form. And the reason is, if I do 36 divided by 11, I end up with a never-ending decimal. It repeats forever and forever and forever, and that's not workable. At some point later on in your mathematical career, you're going to need to use this information on other problems and other pieces and other steps of a problem. When I type it in my calculator, I get 3.27 for all of eternity. I can't plug that in to use it. A fraction is tangible. Decimals, repeating decimals, never-ending decimals are not. So leave your fraction as a fraction. It does need to be reduced. So if you will use on your calculator, instead of the division key, we're going to say do not divide. Instead of using your division key, you should have a fraction key. Most of them look like this. I believe Casio looks like this. If you will use that here instead of the division key, it will spit out an answer in fraction form. So try to leave your answers in fraction form. All right, let's look at another one. These are just going to get longer and longer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this 3 plus 4. Keep this negative with my 11. 3 plus 4 is 7. And then I'm going to just rewrite the problem. I'm not touching anything but the 3 and 4. Now I'm going to get all of my x's on the left side, and I'm going to get all my whole numbers on the right side. I'm going to do this in one step. I'm going to move this 2x here. Now, if there's no sign in front of it, right here, there's no sign. It is understood to be plus, okay? It's understood to be a plus. So I'm going to move my plus 2x over that direction. I'm also going to move my 7 over, and remember, understood plus. I'm not touching my negative 11x. I am moving my plus 2x over. When I move a plus 2x, it becomes negative. I'm not touching my negative 1. I'm going to move my plus 7 over. When I move it, it becomes minus. Now I have all my x's on one side, all my numbers on the other side, and now I just start simplifying. Negative 11 minus 2 is negative 13x. Negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8. Now I'm going to move my negative 13 over here. Now, I have said this, I don't know how many times. The operation changes. The sign does not. So, what operation is happening here? Right here, no sign means multiply. So when I move this over, it's going to become division. The sign of the 13 is negative. The operation is multiplication. So the operation changes, the sign does not. So this becomes negative 8 divided by negative 13. And remember, I'm not going to use a division sign. I mean, at the division button, I'm going to use my fraction button to do 18, or negative 8, I'm sorry, fraction key, negative 13. Well, mine says error, but negative divided by a negative is a positive. 8 over 13. And you're going to just keep it as 8 over 13. Do not convert it to a decimal, okay? All right, let's look at this one. Now I put this one in here because of this right here. There's no number, it's called a coefficient. There's no coefficient in front of this x. But I have one x. You have this thing in mathematics called understood 1. If you have a variable with no coefficient, with no number, there's an understood 1 there. All right, so I'm going to move my plus 1x over here. I am going to move my plus 3x over here. 17x is not moving. Plus understood 1x becomes minus 1x. And I write my 1's in there because they're really easy to forget. I'm not touching my equals. I'm not touching my 19. My plus 3 is going to move over and become minus 3. Now I'm going to simplify. 17x minus 1x is 16x. 19 minus 3 is 16. I'm going to move my 16 over. When I move it over, it becomes division because two things side by side means multiply. 16, I'm going to just write it as a fraction instead of writing it with a division sign. And what is anything over itself? 1. It is absolutely possible to have a 1 or a 0. I always have that question. My kids say, oh, I got a 0. It's obviously wrong. Well, I got a 1. It's okay. You can have a 0 or a 1 for an answer. So here are the steps, okay? Add any like terms. Move all variable terms to one side. That means if it has an x, move it to one side. I almost always move mine to the left. Then we're going to move all non-variable terms, and that should probably have a hyphen right there, to the other side. So anything without an x, move to the other side. Step 4, add any like terms that you have. And then step 5, multiply or divide as needed. You hardly ever multiply, but you almost always divide as your last step. Two things. Number 1, remember any understood 1's. Number 2, leave your fractions as answers. Nope, leave your answers as fractions. Okay, last. So that's where we are so far. Now we're going to add in the next step that we kind of need to go over. And it's distributive property, and this is absolutely a review for you guys, but remember when you have inside of your parentheses is where you start, and if you can't do anything inside, you look outside. Now remember, I can't do anything inside because x and 3 are not like terms, and I distribute this 2 to both pieces. It's easy to just do it to the first term. Make sure you do it to both pieces. So this becomes 2 times x, which is 2x, plus 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay? All right, guys, so we're going to take what we just talked about, and we're going to apply it to solving for x. We have to look inside of our parentheses because the order of operations says we start inside first. We cannot combine x plus 2. They're not like terms. So I have to look outside, and I'm going to distribute. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 2 is 6. And then rewrite the rest of that problem so I have it. Now I am back to where I was last lesson. I'm going to start by simplifying this. 6 minus 7 is negative 1. Okay, now I need to get all of my x's together and my whole numbers, or not my whole numbers, my non-variable terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this a little bit backwards because I'm going to move this over here with the x that's already there. Otherwise, I have to move two things. When I move this, remember, if there's no sign, it's understood to be plus, it becomes a minus. It doesn't matter which side I move my x's to, as long as they're together. I can move them to the left, I can move them to the right. We typically are more comfortable with the x on the left side, but it doesn't have to be there. So now, oops, I forgot to carry my negative down, whoops. Negative 3x minus 3x is negative 6x. And even though this is backwards, I still am going to follow the same steps. My goal is still to get x by itself, which means I still need to move this from here to here. I'm still multiplying between the two because two things side by side with no sign is multiply. So I'm still going to move my negative 6 over. And remember, oops, remember the operation changes from multiplication to division. The sign doesn't change. So negative 1 divided by -6. Remember, we're not actually going to divide them. We're going to use our fraction key. Now, if I type in two negatives as a fraction, it's going to say error. Here's what I know. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. 1/6 is going to be my answer. Okay. A little bit of a longer one. Start inside your parentheses. I can't do anything here. I can't do anything here. So I'm going to distribute this. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times x, remember plus. 4 times x is 4x. I'm not touching that -12 or the equal sign. Now I'm going to do the same thing. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times -6 is -12. So the first step is to distribute. If you can distribute, you need to distribute. Okay? A lot of times people make a mistake. Listen, this 4 stops being distributed at the end of that parenthesis. After that parenthesis, we have a totally different term, and so we don't distribute the 4 past the parentheses. Now I'm going to simplify anything that I can. I have a 12 minus 12. Well, 12 minus 12 is 0. There's no need to write that. It just kind of cancels itself out. So I'm left with 4x equals, and there's nothing on the other side to simplify, so it just becomes that. All right, I distributed. Then I simplified. Now I'm going to move my x's all to the same side. So I'm going to move that from here to here. Remember, it's understood plus if there's no sign, so it becomes a minus when I move it. Listen, don't lose this negative. It's -12, and a minus and a negative are the same thing. So don't lose that minus. 4x minus 2x. I have 4 x's. I take 2 x's away. I have 2x left. Move this from here to here. The operation changes. The sign does not. And -12 divided by 2 is -6. This one's longer. Now, remember me saying you're going to have to learn to start writing things down because some of these are going to get long? Well, we're there. All right, so here's the thing. I have to look inside my parentheses. If I can't do anything, I have to look outside. And I have to distribute this 9 to everything inside of those parentheses. 9 times 7 is 63. 9 times -2x is -18x. Minus 7, I'm not touching, equals 5 times -2 is -10x. Multiply your numbers. 5 times +3 is +15 minus 15. All right. At this point, I'm going to simplify what I can. 63 minus 7 is 56. Now listen, this negative stays with the 18. Whatever sign is in front of that term is its sign. 63 minus 7 is +56. Now 15 minus 15 is going to become 0. So I'm going to just drop that because 0 is nothing. Now I need to start moving things around. So I'm going to kind of work this backwards again. I'm going to move this -18 over here. -18x, I'm sorry. This 56 is going to stay put. My -10x is going to stay put. Instead of a -18x, though, it becomes a plus 18x. -10x plus 18. Oh goodness, that's a terrible 5. -10x plus 18 is 8x, and then I have to move this 8 from here to here. And it becomes 56 divided by 8 equals x, which is 7. So it's easy to get bogged down and lost in these. Take it one step at a time, okay? Let me show you those steps. So these are actually all of the steps that you guys will be doing. Their first step is going to be to distribute. Now, if you don't have anything to distribute, then obviously you don't do that step. Step 2, you're going to add any like terms. Step 3, move all your variable terms. Remember, that means if they have a letter to one side, non-variable terms to the opposite side, add any like terms, and then multiply or divide as needed. And again, I'm going to reiterate, don't lose your understood ones and leave your answers as fractions. We're going to complete the test. Remember, it's not really a test, but it's on that program that I've been using, the easy test thing that we do. So log in, and you're going to complete, I think there's 10 questions that you're going to need to solve. This round is going to be short answers, so just type in your answer. Don't worry about showing your work. Go ahead and work them on notebook paper before you get your answer, and then you can bring that to face-to-face time on Wednesday, and we can try to answer any questions that you have for that. So take care of getting that test done. The link is in the same space where this video was at.